He was the billionaire son who had everything: money, power, privilege. Yet he was failing at the one thing that mattered: himself. And just when the world laughed at his downfall, an unlikely teacher appeared, not in a classroom, but in the janitor's closet. This is the story of how a broken boy and a forgotten woman built something greater than wealth: a legacy. Stay with me, because by the end, you might just see success and yourself differently. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if stories like this inspire you. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're 17. You've never heard the word no in your life. Your home is a mansion on the north side of Chicago, with more rooms than you can count. Every birthday feels like a movie premiere, with celebrities you only ever see on TV. You're driven to school in a sleek Audi while the world stares in envy. That was the life of Ethan Cross, the only son of Richard Cross, a billionaire whose face appeared on magazine covers more often than most people check the weather. From the outside, Ethan had everything: the kind of life kids dreamed of, the kind of power adults whispered about. But inside, Ethan was crumbling. At school, Ethan was famous for three things: his designer clothes, his arrogant smirk, and his terrible grades. The marble hallways of his private school in Chicago echoed with the names of powerful alumni, CEOs, politicians, heirs of dynasties. Ethan fit right in, not because he worked hard, but because his last name opened doors like a golden key. He failed test after test. Teachers passed him out of fear, not merit. And Ethan didn't care. Why would he? One day, all of this, the money, the power, the company, would be his. What could a grade point average do that his last name couldn't? One afternoon, when the school counselor pulled him in to discuss his future, Ethan leaned back in his chair and laughed. "I could buy this school if I wanted to," he said. "What's a grade going to change?" The lines spread across the school like wildfire. Some laughed, some hated him, but no one dared to confront him. After all, no one wanted to risk losing the Cross family's donations. But if school felt cold, home was even colder. Richard Cross was a man of stone, self-made, ruthless, a billionaire who clawed his way to the top with nothing but grit and an iron will. He demanded perfection from everyone, including his son. "You're an embarrassment," Richard told him one night after another phone call from the school. His voice was sharp, cutting like glass. "If you work for me, you'd be fired." Ethan rolled his eyes. "But I'm not your employee. I'm your son. The world doesn't care. Either you become someone, or you'll just be another rich kid with a name and no spine. And I won't carry you." The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan wanted to brush it off, pretend he didn't care. But deep down, he knew his father wasn't bluffing. Richard Cross never bluffed. The next morning, Ethan walked into school as if nothing happened. He strutted through the marble hallways, sunglasses on, designer jacket swaying, like the world belonged to him. But there was someone watching him. Near the side entrance, a woman in a faded janitor's uniform mopped the floor. She was in her early 50s, her posture upright, her eyes calm and sharp. Marion Brooks. To Ethan, she was invisible, just another worker in the background of his perfect, privileged life. He never noticed her, never cared, at least not yet. But soon, Ethan's world began to collapse. Another failed test, then another. Math, 24%. History, 31%. Biology, 0. Teachers stopped hiding their frustration. The counselor warned him, "You're not just in trouble. You're at the very bottom of your class." And then came the blow he never expected. His father cut him off. The credit cards? Gone. The Audi? Taken. Now, the billionaire son had to ride the school bus like everybody else. Humiliation burned every step he took. The whispers, the laughter, the stares. The golden prince had fallen. One gray morning, Ethan trudged into school with his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. As he passed the janitor near the cafeteria, he heard her whisper something under her breath while scrubbing the floor. "The only true wisdom," she said softly, "is in knowing you know nothing." Ethan stopped. "What did you just say?" Marion looked up, calm and unafraid. "Nothing you're ready to understand, boy." He laughed, but the words stung. Something about them clung to his chest. For the first time, Ethan noticed her, really noticed her. She wasn't just cleaning floors. She was something else. And he had no idea yet, but that woman, Marion Brooks, was about to change everything he thought he knew about life. Close your eyes and picture this. The son of a billionaire, once worshipped and feared at school, now sitting alone at the bottom of his class. His expensive watch still ticked on his wrist, but time wasn't on his side anymore. The golden cage he lived in was starting to crack. This was Ethan Cross, the boy who thought he didn't need help from anyone, until the day life humbled him. The fall didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, painful unraveling. First came the test results. 24% in math, 31% in history, 0% in biology. Ethan's report card looked less like a future leader's and more like a disaster warning. The counselor sighed heavily when she showed him the results. "Ethan," she said, her voice firm but tired, "you are the lowest performing student in your entire grade. If you continue this way, you won't just miss graduation. You'll repeat senior year." Ethan smirked, trying to wear his old mask of arrogance. "It doesn't matter. My father can buy me into any college I want." But the counselor didn't smile. She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "Ethan, money won't save you forever. One day, you'll have to stand on your own. And right now, you can't." Those words pierced deeper than he expected. At home, things were no better. His father, Richard Cross, had reached the end of his patience. "No more cars. No more cards. No more free rides," Richard said coldly. "From this day forward, you earn what you get, or you get nothing." And just like that, the Audi was gone, the platinum credit cards canceled. Ethan Cross, the boy who once glided through life, was now boarding the yellow school bus with everyone else. The prince had fallen. The other students noticed immediately. The same kids Ethan once mocked for wearing hand-me-downs or bringing homemade lunches now laughed at him. Whispers filled the hallways. "Look, Cross is riding the bus now. Guess Daddy finally cut the leash. Rich kids, just another failure." Ethan tried to act like it didn't bother him, but inside, it burned. Every laugh, every whisper was a reminder that he wasn't invincible anymore. For the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't feared. He was pitted, and maybe even hated. And then, Marion Brooks appeared again. It was a rainy morning. Ethan dragged himself into school, hood over his head, avoiding eye contact. And there she was, kneeling on the floor, scrubbing mud from the tiles. Most students walked past her like she was invisible. But Ethan slowed down. He remembered her words from before. "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." Something about that line haunted him. It echoed in his chest every time he stared at his failing grades. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Hey, you said something the other day. About wisdom." Marion didn't look up at first. She wrung out her mop and spoke calmly. "You remembered?" "Yeah. I mean, it was kind of weird. A janitor quoting philosophers." This time she looked at him, her eyes sharp but calm. "What's weirder," she said, "is a boy who thinks he knows everything, but can't even pass a reading test." The words hit him like a punch. No teacher had ever spoken to him like that. No one dared. But Marion did. She didn't care about his last name. She didn't flinch at his reputation. Ethan swallowed hard. "You used to be a teacher, didn't you?" Her silence was enough. He saw it in her eyes. Not just a teacher, something more. The next day, Ethan did something he never imagined himself doing. He stayed behind after school and found Marion in the East Wing, sweeping dust into a pan. "I need your help," he said. His voice cracked on the word need. She stopped sweeping and leaned on the handle. "With what?" "My grades. My everything. I can't do this on my own." Marion studied him carefully, as if weighing his soul. Then she shook her head. "Why me? You can afford the best tutors in the city." "They all quit," Ethan admitted, embarrassed. "They said I was impossible." Marion raised an eyebrow. "Were they wrong?" Ethan looked down at his shoes. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. "Finally," she sighed. "Fine, I'll help you. But there's one condition." He looked up quickly. "Anything. You leave your pride at the door. You stop hiding behind your last name. You start from zero, from a floor." Ethan hesitated. His whole life, pride was his shield. His name was his armor. But now, both were useless. He took a deep breath. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll start from a floor." The following morning, Ethan showed up before dawn. The halls were empty, the air cold. He found Marion polishing the floors, earbuds in, humming softly. She pulled one earbud out when she saw him. "You're on time." "Good. Let's begin." She handed him a thin paperback book. The pages were worn, the cover faded. "Read this," she said. Ethan frowned. "It's Shakespeare." Marion smirked. "Yes. And before you roll your eyes, remember this. Words have built empires and destroyed them. If you can learn to master words, you can master yourself." So Ethan read, slowly, stumbling over phrases that felt ancient and heavy. But Marion didn't let him stop. "What does this mean to you?" she asked. "Why do you think he used that word instead of another? What's hiding between the lines?" At first, Ethan mumbled through the answers. "I don't know. It's boring. Who cares?" But Marion pushed harder. "Don't just read. Feel. Don't just answer. Think." By the end of that first hour, Ethan's brain felt like it had run a marathon. But something inside him had shifted. That night, Marion gave him homework. Not equations. Not vocabulary drills. Something different. "Write," she said. "Not for school. For yourself. Write about what keeps you awake at night. Write about what you're afraid to say out loud. Write the truth, even if it scares you." Ethan wanted to laugh. "That's not homework." Marion's gaze sharpened. "It's harder than homework. And if you want to grow, you'll do it." So he tried. At first, the words felt clumsy, forced. But as the pen scratched across the page, something unlocked. He wrote about his father's disappointment, about the pressure of carrying the cross name, about the loneliness that money couldn't cure. For the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't writing for grades, for teachers, for appearances. He was writing for himself. When Marion read it the next morning, she didn't say "good job." She circled whole paragraphs in red and said, "This is shallow. Rewrite it." Ethan groaned. "You're tougher than my teachers." "I'm not here to pass you," she replied. "I'm here to change you." Over the weeks, Ethan learned more about Marion's past. She hadn't always been a janitor. Once, she had been Dr. Marion Brooks, a professor of philosophy. She lectured in lecture halls filled with students. She published papers. She inspired minds. But when she uncovered corruption at her university and refused to stay silent, powerful people destroyed her career. She lost her job, lost her status, and just when she thought she couldn't lose more, her husband died in a car accident. Life stripped everything from her, except her knowledge, her voice, and her dignity. Sometimes, Marion said softly one morning, "Life takes away the stage, but not the song. I still know how to teach, even if my classroom is a dirty hallway." Ethan sat there, speechless. For the first time in his life, he saw real strength, not the kind that came with money or power, but the kind that came with resilience. Day by day, Ethan's arrogance began to melt away. The boy who once mocked others started to notice them. The kid eating alone in the cafeteria. The classmate working late shifts to pay tuition. The teachers who gave everything and received little. He started helping others quietly, sharing notes, encouraging classmates, even standing up against bullies he once laughed with. Marion's words echoed in his heart. You don't measure depth with a shallow ruler. Ethan was no longer just learning to pass exams. He was learning how to see the world differently. And though no one knew it yet, something extraordinary was beginning. A janitor, a fallen prince, a seed planted in secret. That seed would one day grow into a revolution. Every morning, while the city of Chicago was still asleep, one unlikely pair gathered in the quiet corners of school. A janitor with a mop, a fallen prince with a notebook, and between them, a seed of change that no one could see yet. But soon, everyone would feel. It didn't happen overnight. Change never does. But slowly, Ethan Cross was becoming someone his classmates barely recognized. The boy who once strutted down hallways in expensive sneakers now walked with books tucked under his arm. The smirk on his face was replaced with something new. Focus. Determination. He asked questions in class. Real questions. Questions that made teachers pause, caught off guard by the sudden spark in a student they had written off as hopeless. Why do we memorize answers but never question the system itself? What's the point of history if we don't learn from it? Some teachers smiled, intrigued. Others frowned, suspicious. But the students noticed. For the first time, Ethan wasn't just another rich kid flaunting his father's money. He was different. One afternoon, after a long lesson with Marion, Ethan asked her something bold. "Why only me? Why not help more students?" Marion paused, her mop leaning against the wall. "Because I was told to stay invisible. And invisible people don't get classrooms." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll make one." That night, they found a perfect place, the old library. Once filled with books, now abandoned, its shelves stood empty, its windows dusty. No one ever went there. And that's where it began. First came one student, a girl who struggled with English essays. Ethan invited her quietly. Then another, a boy who wanted to understand history instead of memorizing it. Soon, small groups of students gathered in the forgotten library after hours. They sat in circles on the dusty floor while Marion spoke, her voice carrying the weight of wisdom. She didn't lecture. She asked. She provoked. She pushed. "What do you think freedom means? Why do we chase success but forget happiness? What do you see when you look in the mirror?" The students wrote. They debated. They laughed. And for the first time, they felt seen. Ethan wasn't just learning anymore. He was leading. But not everyone welcomed this change. One afternoon, as Ethan left the library, a familiar voice sneered. Well, look who thinks he's Socrates now." It was Derek, the same boy who used to follow Ethan around like a shadow, a bully who thrived on mocking the weak. When Ethan was on top, Derek was his loudest ally. Now that Ethan had fallen, Derek was hungry for revenge. "What's this I hear about you hanging out with the janitor?" Derek laughed. "What's next? You gonna mop floors with her too?" The old Ethan would have snapped back, mocked him, tried to prove himself. But this Ethan had changed. He looked Derek in the eyes, calm and steady. "At least I'm learning something. What about you?" The hallway went silent. A few students nearby smirked, impressed by Ethan's composure. Derek's face turned red. "This isn't over," Derek muttered, storming away. Ethan didn't need to fight anymore. His strength wasn't in fists or insults. It was in the truth. Among the students who joined the secret lessons was Layla, a quiet girl with bright eyes and a mind sharper than most gave her credit for. She noticed a change in Ethan more than anyone. One evening after a session, she pulled him aside. "You're not the same person you were last year," she said softly. Ethan shrugged. "Guess failing woke me up." "No," Layla said, smiling. "It's her. Marion. She's teaching you how to see. And now you're teaching us." Her words stayed with Ethan long after she walked away. For the first time in his life, he wasn't admired for his money or his last name. He was respected for who he was becoming. But whispers travel fast. The small circle in the abandoned library grew larger, and soon the school administration noticed. One morning, the principal called Marion into his office. "Mrs. Brooks," he said stiffly, "we've received reports that you've been overstepping your duties, holding unofficial classes, encouraging students to question their teachers." Marion didn't flinch. "I've been helping them learn. Your job is to clean floors, not teach philosophy. If this continues, we'll have no choice but to let you go." Marion returned to the hallway that afternoon, her face calm, but her steps heavy. Ethan noticed immediately. "What do they say?" he asked. She looked at him, her voice steady but low. "They said I'm not allowed to teach. Not here. Not anywhere." Ethan clenched his fists. "That's not fair." "Life isn't fair, Ethan," Marion said gently. "But it is honest. And honesty is what we cling to." That same week, Ethan's father found out about the library sessions. Richard Cross was livid. "Philosophy? With a janitor?" he thundered. "Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? You're supposed to be preparing for Yale, not wasting your time with meaningless debates." Ethan stood his ground. "It's not meaningless. For the first time, I'm actually learning something. Something real." His father's eyes narrowed. "If you keep this up, Ethan, don't expect me to pay for college. Don't expect me to support this foolishness." The old Ethan would have cowered. But this Ethan took a deep breath and whispered, "Then I'll do it without you." For a moment, Richard Cross just stared at his son, stunned. And though he said nothing more, his silence was louder than his anger. Despite the threats, the library meetings continued. What began with one student turned into 5, then 10, then 20. Word spread quietly, like a spark catching dry leaves. Students who felt unseen, unheard, or unimportant gathered in that dusty room. They debated, they wrote, they cried, they discovered that their voices mattered. And at the heart of it all was Ethan Cross, the boy who once mocked knowledge, now leading others to seek it. One evening, as the group sat in a circle, Marian looked around the room, her eyes shining. "Do you see what you've done, Ethan?" she said softly. "You've turned failure into fire. You've built a place where voices grow." Ethan glanced at the students around him, faces lit with hope, eyes alive with possibility. For the first time in his life, he felt something he never felt in mansions or luxury cars. Purpose. But sparks, if left unchecked, become flames. And flames attract attention. The administration wasn't done watching. His father wasn't done warning. Derek wasn't done scheming. The quiet revolution in the forgotten library was about to be tested. And Ethan, still learning how to stand, would soon face the fight of his life. But one thing was certain. The boy who once lived in a golden cage was now free. And freedom is dangerous. There are moments in life when silence is heavier than sound. And for Ethan Cross, that moment came the day the library doors closed for good. It happened on a Monday morning. The halls buzzed with chatter, lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked against the polished floors. But beneath that ordinary noise was a rumor traveling like wildfire. The janitor's gone. They fired her. She's not coming back. Ethan heard it before he saw it. And when he turned the corner, he saw Marian walking down the hallway, her box of belongings clutched in her hands. He froze. No, they can't. But it was true. The administration had found its excuse. Too many complaints about her overstepping. Too many whispers about unauthorized classes. Too much truth spoken in a place that only wanted silence. When Marian reached him, Ethan's throat closed up. "Say something," he begged. She placed the box down for a moment, touched his shoulder, and whispered, "The classroom was never the library, Ethan. It was you." And then she walked away. He wanted to run after her. He wanted to scream at the principal, at his father, at anyone who had stolen her voice. But instead, he stood frozen, as if the floor beneath him had vanished. The revolution had lost its spark. That evening, Ethan unlocked the dusty door to the abandoned library. The students came, one by one, expecting Marian to appear. But the chair she always sat in remained empty. They looked to Ethan. "What now?" one asked. "Is it over?" another whispered. Ethan stared at the empty chair. His chest ached. For days, he had no answers. He avoided the hallways, avoided the questions, avoided the truth. But one night, as he flipped through his notebook, he stumbled across Marian's words written in red ink. "Don't just speak. Mean it. Don't just mean it. Live it." That's when the idea hit him. A week later, the school announced its annual public speaking contest, a tradition where students competed for scholarships and recognition. Normally, Ethan would have laughed at the idea. Him, on stage, talking about what money? Luxury cars? His last name? But this time, it felt different. This time, it wasn't about winning. It was about saying what had to be said. He signed his name on the registration sheet. His classmates raised their eyebrows. Derek scoffed. "You?" Derek sneered. "The guy who couldn't even pass English? This is going to be fun." But Ethan didn't flinch. For the first time, he knew exactly why he was doing this. Ethan spent nights writing and rewriting his speech. Every word, every line, every pause mattered. Marian's voice echoed in his mind with every edit. "This sentence is pretty but hollow. Rewrite it. Don't just say it. Bleed it. Truth isn't polished, it's raw." And so, Ethan poured himself into the speech. He wrote about failure, about shame, about being the son of a billionaire but feeling poorer than anyone else in the room. He wrote about the janitor who taught him that greatness wasn't about power, but about seeing others. He cried over those pages. He tore them up, rewrote them, and cried again. But by the time the contest arrived, he had something real, something alive. The auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents in suits, teachers in neat rows, students whispering in the back. On stage, a banner read, Annual speech contest. Ethan waited backstage, his palms sweating, his heart pounding so loud he thought the microphone would catch it. One by one, students stepped onto the stage. Some recited polished speeches about politics, success, or leadership. The crowd clapped politely. Then the announcer's voice rang out. Our next speaker, Ethan Cross. The auditorium shifted. Whispers rose like waves. Cross? Really? Isn't he the failure? This should be good. Ethan walked onto the stage. His legs felt heavy, but his eyes searched the crowd. And then, there she was. In the far back row, almost hidden, Marion Brooks sat quietly. She had slipped in unnoticed, her hands folded, her gaze steady. Ethan's chest loosened. He gripped the podium and began. I used to think winning meant having more than everyone else. More money, more cars, more everything. But I was wrong. Because the truth is, I had everything and nothing. I was failing school, failing myself, failing life. And then someone saw me. Not a teacher, not my father, not a tutor. A janitor. She didn't see the money. She didn't see the name. She saw a boy lost in his own emptiness. And she taught me the hardest lesson I've ever learned. That the measure of a person isn't how high they stand, but how many they lift when they're down. The room was silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Just silence. Ethan's voice trembled but grew stronger with each line. I'm not here to impress you with perfect grades or promises of greatness. I'm here to tell you that greatness is not about being seen. It's about seeing others. And sometimes, the wisest voice in the room is the one we ignore. The one scrubbing the floors when no one's watching. He looked straight at Marion. I owe everything I am becoming to her. When he stepped back, the silence cracked into applause. At first soft, then louder, then thunderous. Teachers clapped. Students stood. Even the principal, stiff and uncomfortable, was forced to join in. And in the back row, Marion Brooks wiped a tear from her cheek. The next morning, Ethan was no longer invisible. Students approached him in the hallways, not with mockery, but with respect. Your words, they hit me. I didn't know you were like that. Can you help me with writing? For the first time, people didn't want Ethan's money. They wanted his mind. Even his father couldn't ignore it. Richard Cross sat silently at the breakfast table, a newspaper in his hand. Ethan's picture filled the front page of the school newsletter with the headline, Billionaire's son delivers speech that stuns audience. Richard cleared his throat. You spoke well. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't approval. But for Ethan, it was a crack in the wall his father had built around himself. Days later, Ethan found Marion in the park, sitting on a bench with a small notebook in her lap. You were there, he said, sitting beside her. I was, she replied. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't about me, she said softly. It was about you finding your voice. Ethan looked at her, his eyes burning with determination. They silenced you, but I won't let them keep you silent. I'm going to build something. A place where your voice, and voices like yours, can never be erased again. Marion smiled, her eyes shining with something between pride and sorrow. Then you've truly learned. That night, Ethan wrote in his notebook one final sentence underlined 3 times. The revolution is not in the library. It is in us. And though the battle was far from over, though challenges waited ahead, Ethan knew one thing for certain. The speech wasn't the end. It was the beginning. There are moments that split your life into a before and an after. For Ethan Cross, that moment was the speech. He had walked onto the stage as the failure son of a billionaire. He walked off as something else, someone with a voice, someone with purpose. And once you taste purpose, you can't go back. The night of the contest, Ethan arrived home to find his father waiting. Richard Cross stood by the window, arms crossed, his jaw tight. That speech, Richard said flatly. It's all over the school. Parents are talking. The press might pick it up. Ethan nodded. Good. Richard's eyes narrowed. You embarrassed this family. Praising a janitor? Making it sound like she's your savior? That woman mops floors, Ethan. No. Ethan shot back, his voice steady. She saved me. She taught me more than anyone else ever has. More than you ever did. The words landed like blows. Richard's face hardened. If you keep choosing her, you lose everything. Your money, your car, your inheritance. Don't test me. Ethan's heart pounded, but he remembered Marion's words. Sometimes you have to lose everything to become who you really are. So he said it. Then maybe I need to lose it all. Silence filled the room. Richard turned away, cold as stone. Pack your things. And just like that, Ethan Cross, son of a billionaire, was out. The days after were the hardest. Ethan moved into a small rented room near the city. No luxury, no Audi, no credit card to swipe. Just four plain walls and a notebook. At school, whispers followed him everywhere. Some said he was brave. Others mocked him, the rich kid who threw it all away. But Ethan wasn't broken. Every morning, he still opened his notebook. He wrote. He studied. He remembered Marion's lessons. One night, while staring at the blank page, an idea came to him. Bigger than an essay, bigger than a speech. What if there was a place, a school, a center, where anyone could learn the way Marion had taught him? A place with no shame, no judgment, no barriers of class or name. A place where being seen mattered more than being rich. The idea burned inside him until he couldn't ignore it anymore. Ethan found Marion in a modest apartment on the south side of Chicago. She answered the door in a worn cardigan, her eyes surprised but warm. You shouldn't have come all this way, she said. I had to, Ethan replied, handing her an envelope. Inside was his high school diploma, his first college acceptance letter, and a handwritten note. Marion unfolded it and read aloud. I want to start something. A center where people can learn like I did, with honesty, with depth, without shame. I want to call it the Marion Institute. Her eyes filled with tears. Why me? Because everything I am now, Ethan said softly, started with you. She shook her head, overwhelmed. I can't do this alone. Then don't, Ethan whispered. Do it with me. For a long moment, Marion was silent. Then she reached out and took his hand. Always. Months later, in a repurposed community center with peeling paint and broken windows, a new chapter began. They swept floors, painted walls, dragged in secondhand desks. And when the doors opened, the Marion Institute was born. It wasn't fancy. No marble hallways, no golden plaques, no billion-dollar donations. But it was alive. Children who had been written off came through those doors. Teenagers failing their classes. Adults who had never finished high school. Immigrants learning English. Kids who didn't believe they were smart until someone looked them in the eye and told them they mattered. Marion taught with chalk and books and soul. Ethan ran the programs, raised small donations, but never stopped learning. And soon a movement grew. Word spread across Chicago. The billionaire's son turned his back on fortune to start a school with a janitor. Reporters came. Articles were written. And then invitations. Universities wanted Marion as a guest lecturer. Organizations wanted to support the institute. But what mattered most weren't the headlines. It was the notebook handed to Marion one evening by a 12-year-old boy who struggled to read. Inside, in shaky handwriting, were the words. This place made me feel smart for the first time. Marion cried that day. So did Ethan. The institute kept growing. And one day, during its official opening ceremony, Richard Cross appeared. He didn't come with reporters or bodyguards. He came quietly, standing in the back of the crowded room. He watched his son speak, watched the children laugh, watched Marion smile like a teacher reborn. Afterward, Richard approached Ethan outside. His voice was low, uncertain. I didn't expect to cry. Ethan met his father's eyes. And I didn't expect to forgive you. They hugged, not as billionaire and heir, not as teacher and disappointment, just as father and son, both learning in their own way. Years passed. The Marion Institute became a beacon, a place where truth lived louder than wealth. Students who once hid in shame stood tall with new dreams. Teachers volunteered their time. Writers, activists, thinkers, all found a home there. And Ethan Cross, he never stopped learning. He studied philosophy, literature, and education. He wrote essays that spread online, speeches that traveled across cities. One evening, he stood on a stage in New York, accepting a national award for educational innovation. Cameras flashed, the audience waited. He held a microphone, paused, and said, "They said I failed everything until I learned one thing that changed my life. That greatness doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing others. And sometimes, the person who saves you isn't in a suit. Sometimes they're holding a mop, whispering philosophy when no one's listening. Her name is Marion Brooks. She didn't just save my grades. She saved my soul. The room erupted into applause. But Ethan wasn't smiling for the cameras. He was smiling at Marion, who sat in the front row, her hands folded, tears streaming down her face. Ethan once believed wealth was measured in cars, money, power. But now, standing in the institute surrounded by students laughing, crying, learning, he knew the truth. Real wealth was this: transformation, community, hope. And every time a student walked through those doors believing they had no future, Marion would hand them a notebook, the same way she once handed it to Ethan, and say, "Start here. Start honest. Start becoming someone." And so the cycle continued. The boy who had everything but purpose. The janitor who lost everything but her voice. Together, they built something eternal. Not a fortune, a legacy. The Marion Institute. Ethan's journey reminds us that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in the lives we touch and the legacies we leave. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And if you want more stories that inspire and challenge the way we see the world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me for the next one.